This is a CW Spiral, a podcast run by two Barchies and a Bughead. We're your hosts, Sabrina Reed,
Michael Patterson,
and Reed Gaudens,
bringing you history about the network, the latest news, and in-depth spoiler-filled discussions of some of our favorite shows on the CW. Okay, very exciting pod this week. I mean, they're all exciting, but it's the Stargirl farewell pod. But before we jump into what happened in Blue Valley, which is very exciting, we do have some CW news. And off the top is that we are doing a Legends of Tomorrow giveaway. We're going to do the whole complete box set of the series. And it starts actually the day that this pod drops on Monday, December 12th. It's a short one, though. You have a week to participate in the giveaway because it ends on Friday, December 16th at 12 a.m. Central Time. We're going to give all the details for the giveaway on our Twitter account. You want to make sure you follow it. We're at the CW Spiral on Twitter. And of course, love Legends of Tomorrow always.
Yeah, no better way to celebrate Legends of Tomorrow than by revisiting all 7 wacky, wonderful seasons of it.
I feel like December, Legends of Tomorrow is going to take over December because you have our giveaway, and then there's also Bebo Saves Christmas, which means Bebo Saves Legends. That's the mindset we're all living in.
Oh, I am tweeting out with that hashtag when Bebo is on because can't celebrate the holidays without celebrating Legends, especially after last year's Bebo Saves Christmas.
Yes. So we finally have a premiere date for The Flash Season 9, and it is not coming in January, as people suspected. It's coming in Wednesday, February 8th at 8 p.m. ET. It's sliding into Stargirl's spot.
It wouldn't be the CW if it didn't contradict everything I said. I predicted that The Flash might be one of the latecomers because it has the shortest season, and here we are with The Flash leading the new era of the pack. And I'm like, it's fantastic that the season's finally starting, but it's starting to feel very real now that the show's starting to end. I cannot wait for it to begin. I think they've got some exciting things, but it's also just very exciting that we have the start of part 2 of the schedule because, again, it's been a long time coming. But yeah, I cannot wait to celebrate with our Central City favorites one more time and enjoy the 13 episodes of season 9. And I'm sure it'll be a hoot, probably one that we'll have many thoughts about, and we will get into that over the air. But yeah, I'm just excited to have the Flash back in our lives one more time.
Same. I want them to take notes for Stargirl's series finale. That's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to wrap it up very nicely and give a nice tribute to the Flash by the time it comes to its end. And since it's 13 episodes, we're going to be in and out. Well, presumably there was the whole Superman and Lois season 2 had 15 episodes, and yet we were on the longest ride ever. Not that we didn't enjoy it, but it was the longest ride. So hopefully the Flash isn't doing that.
Yeah, I feel like linear storyline, less hiatuses, and get to the point and get in and out, as we like to say a lot in this podcast. I would just like a consistent and enjoyable final season. And again, just like how Stargirl did it.
Yes. Speaking of Stargirl, so she's expected to be in Titan season 4, part 2, right, Michael?
Yes, we may have bid farewell to Stargirl the series, but it's not the last we'll see of Brack Bassinger as Courtney Whitmore, because I believe season 4, part 2 of Titans is doing a crossover with Stargirl, but it may also be a crossover with Doom Patrol. The rumors came out and said it was a 3-way crossover. The reports since have only said it's a 2-way crossover. So we'll say. But I know that the character, without getting into spoilery territory, the character of Beast Boy, something happens to him where he kind of disappears, and the next episode, his name's Garfield or Gar. The next episode is called Dude, Where's My Gar? And based on set photos, I believe Gar will find his way to an alternate universe and cross paths with Stargirl in Blue Valley High School. So of course all of us are excited to see it. It's going to be weird seeing what could be Stargirl's potential final season on Titans, but we will take all the content we can get, and if anything, the series finale of Stargirl's left me more excited to see her in the future.
Yeah, I wonder if it's going to be Courtney after the events of the series finale, or like at a different time period that somehow would make sense in the Stargirl universe, but isn't where she is by the time she ends season 3.
Watch them do a completely different Courtney that isn't the same one, and it's another one in the multiverse. Who knows at this point? But yeah, I think it'll just be nice to see her. And maybe it could be in the 10-year gap between the time jump that we saw in the end of the series finale, which I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, it would be nice to see her again because you can never have too much Stargirl.
When they're manifesting, if it is a different Stargirl that is DCEU Stargirl,
Mhm.
like, and then Brett can just have more roles in the movies and the other shows.
I will take that.
But we should launch into the finale because we watched it out of context for me and Reed.
But you see, this is the most important thing. Are you really out of context? Have I been keeping you up to date
Well,
the whole
that's
season?
true.
What did you
But like
guys think?
even out of context, I feel like this episode was, first of all, one of the best episodes of television I've watched
Mm-hmm.
ever. Like they did so much. They covered so much ground that I didn't, even though I didn't, even though I'm listening to Michael's reviews and explanations of what's happening, I didn't. I don't think it was important for me to know everything in context and to just watch it and enjoy it because it works for me without knowing all the ins and outs.
I feel the same. We have been on this ride with you, Michael, via your reviews, but it was like different watching it. I know you've been talking about how cinematic it is, but actually sitting there for the hour block, it's like it really is. Budget was there. Like, it was truly was.
They spent some money on this episode.
Yes.
That's the thing. I feel like with Stargirl, not to like shade any of the other superhero shows, Superman and Lois aside, not to shade any of the other superhero shows, being on network TV, if season fall into the procedural story of the week kind of format or whatever, Stargirl plays the long game, and it is basically just a 13-part movie. It will make you wait for the action, but when it gives it to you, it delivers. And I feel like that really came across because Reed, for example, the previous episode you watched was a very, very quiet one. There was like no action whatsoever in it. And then this one was just like smack down from start through finish. And I feel like they really delivered on all fronts.
Yeah, I was overstimulated and that's a compliment. That's not a bad thing at all. Like there was just so much happening, especially in that big fight scene. I was like, there's so much to look at. There's so many perspectives. There were so many like story points going on, but it never felt overstuffed or like they were trying to do too much. They were doing a lot, but it was never too much. There's always something to look at, a new dynamic changing. Everything was going on in that scene. And I was laughing, I was gasping, I was like freaking out. Not as much as last week on when we were talking about the penultimate, but that scene blew me away. Like it felt like a movie. It felt like I was watching a movie.
And for an extended fight sequence, it did not feel like you were sitting there for an abundance of time. Like I was exhausted by the end because I was exhausted for them because they were running around and punching, kicking, throwing ice. But it had so much like heart to it as well as levity and just serious like action happening everywhere. I mean, I also laughed. I said this to y'all. I will not be over how grandma died. I just do not like the Wizard of Oz shot. I was like, not them doing that to her. And then they moved on. Like, yeah, she's dead.
Very quickly. Yeah, I was divided about that. I loved the moment when I watched it. I will admit I laughed at something serious, but I was a bit divided about that because we talked about Grandma Icicle before. It looked like she was coming around. She was an emotional wreck when her husband had the heart attack, and meanwhile now all of a sudden she's like, if you don't kill her, I'll kill you. Very one-dimensional. And then she got Wizard of Oz out of the story. And I mean, it worked, but like we did not want to get emotional over Grandma dying because we turned her into such a one-dimensional villain. It totally worked. It was a great moment. But like it's interesting watching how quick she pivoted back to like the villain kind of story. And I'm glad Grandpa Icicle came through in the end because like we did say he was kind of torn and didn't want the fighting anymore. And we finally saw that when Beth sensed the hesitation and the two of them didn't want to fight each other. And yeah, we have time for Grandpa Icicle, even if we never really had time for Grandma Icicle.
He kind of took me out and like I related to him because during that fight scene, there was a moment where he was just like standing there and like taking it all in, not knowing what was happening. People were like yelling in his direction. He's like, I don't know. And I'm like, with you there, Grandpa. There's a lot happening.
He's like, you don't want to fight me, and I don't want to fight you. Let's not.
He's like, what am I doing here?
He's like, how far have we sunk in that we're fighting in the middle of a junkyard, y'all? Like, stop and take that, internalize that. Like, but everyone's just doing their thing. Especially Courtney. I loved the sequence when she got the staff back. It was very, goodness. I believe in me, and I loved it so much.
I said my biggest worry going into this, because it was a season finale and not a series finale, was that we weren't going to get one of those triumphant Stargirl moments, and people can call them cheesy or whatever you want. But because she'd lost the staff, because she'd questioned herself whether she was worthy or whatnot, I think we needed one of those moments to end not just the season, but the show on. And the goosebumps I got in that moment, I tell you, I love that we were able to stop the bam, 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 bam off the fight scene just to take in one of those lovely slow motion moments, take in the grandeur of Stargirl, if you will, the character and the show, and then go back to the craziness of the fighting. It was just, it made time for story beats, even though we practically spent half of the episode in this like non-stop fight scene. And between the Grandpa Icicle's I don't want to fight anymore, between Grandma Icicle's death, they knew when to stop at the right times. And I just feel like that really came in, because you can watch a lot of fight scenes and think, okay, when's this going to end? But I never felt like that with this one. It was just like, it made the wait for it worthwhile, and yet it still made time for story in the middle of the battle, and I really appreciated that.
Just people don't like the cheesiness of her big triumphant moments, because I feel like they should reevaluate their
That's the
feelings
thing.
on that.
I think Stargirl gets away with it because of its lighthearted and fun tone.
Okay.
Generally, a lot of people prefer their I'm dark, broody superhero kind of shows. Whereas I think the reason Stargirl shines brighter than any of them is just because it is so lighthearted and fun. Yes, it's written in a mature way, in the same way that those like dark, broody superhero shows would be, but it doesn't shy away from the light. It's not a depressing watch. It's a very fun watch. And like you guys said yourself, you felt like every lighthearted emotion within those space of 40 minutes. And I think that's what superhero content should make you feel. It was just a lot of fun. It was such a triumphant fight scene. It was such a triumphant episode. And yeah, give me those Courtney getting her the staff back in slow motion moments every day of the week. I love them.
I think I mentioned this too in the last episode that I watched, but this show writes to character relationships so well that like, this is the second episode of the series that I've ever watched. And I was shipping Courtney and Cameron is his name, Icicle Boy, whatever. I was like, what are we getting together? What's happening here? And his dramatic exit when he was like done with her with the ice thing, first of all, laughed, but I was also like, oh my God, no. I need them to be together. And that the moment when they do, I don't want to say get back together, because they just hugged, like they just had each other back in their lives. They kind of just like, right? They kind of like put everything, kept everything in the past. That felt so special, and like I had chills, and they didn't kiss, right? I'm not forgetting that.
They went very
I'm glad
80s
that
movie
they
with it.
Yeah, I'm glad that they didn't, because I feel like that doesn't always have to be the be all end all expression of love on TV. Like it can just be like, we're not there yet. We're just gonna hug it out, and that's gonna feel as special as a kiss. I love that scene so much.
It was amazing, and I think that's the important thing, because that was the last time we saw Courtney in the finale. I think that was important because, yes, when watching it as a series finale, you might be like, they're not going to have time to get back together. What are we going to do with these 10 minutes? But at the same time, when a scene like that comes across, it came at me in a very realistic kind of way, because at the end of the day, I don't think Cameron's in a place where he can be in a relationship. He needs a lot of help first. And regardless of how he feels about Courtney, she's the person who can help him, because she's done this with so many heroes before. And I think that was what it was important, because he said, do you really think you can help me? Of course, she didn't answer the question. She ran towards him and gave him a huge hug, which of course is the answer. But I just think there was so much unsaid by that very, very short scene, and we knew what needed to be said by it. It did all the work more than like dialogue or one kiss or anything could have been. It didn't wrap it up in a neat little bow, but it got the story to where it needed to be. And then you can have the time jump later on, wrap it up in a neat little bow.
But the time jump, can we?
Right.
You said it, and now I need to discuss it.
We do.
We had two. There was the 3-month one where that was Cindy, right?
No, that was Artemis, the daughter of the daughter of the Crocs. She wanted to get vengeance on Icicle for killing her parents, and she did.
I was shocked. I was like, "Oh, we're gonna end this show with burning a man alive."
Right.
But then they hit us with the other one.
It was very Vampire Diaries. She was having her Julie Plec moment.
Oh yeah.
just up at the top, dramatic. We're at a castle and burns the man alive. So he got his comeuppance.
Yes. You see, when he when Cameron sent him flying literally, and we saw the big ice face fly into the sky, I was like, now hold on a minute, we can't end like that, because while that ambiguous send the villain off, they'll come back at some point. We've seen on the Flash countless times with the Reverse Flash, but because the show had already killed Icicle in season 1, letting him loose into the atmosphere in season 3 would have been a bit of a disappointment when the show needed to end. So I'm glad we did go back there. Listen to me, I sound all murderous. I'm glad he died. But I feel like that was an important death. He got away. They were like, is he there? Will he ever come back? Whatever. But I think of all the characters on the show, it was most important that Artemis was the one that got to kill Icicle, because at the end of the day, the way he destroyed her parents and her family, who had really made a great deal of progress, that was disgusting. So I mean, like, he got his comeuppance, and I'm not sad about it. But it was interesting. I feel like if the show had gone on, it would have left Artemis in a place like, can I really be a hero when I just committed the ultimate sin? But the time jump that takes us 10 years into the future shows us that Artemis did find her way to heroism, because when the Shade is talking about all of the heroes on the new JSA, he does name drop Artemis. So she got to join the JSA. He also name drops Icicle, who we can assume was Cameron, got to join the JSA. Of course, he name drops Jakeem Thunder, because him and the Thunderbolt pen have now become one. He also name dropped Stripe 2.0, which I believe is Mike. He obviously starts operating Pat's robot. And then, of course, we have the rest of the JSA as well. So I really appreciated that scene, because even though, first of all, as you know, I love the Shade. I've talked about my favorite old-fashioned British man for the whole run of the show. I'm glad in the end he was a villain. He got to redeem himself as well. Now he's like the tour guide of the JSA museum. Love
he's
that.
Like a docent.
Love that for him. But even though Stargirl was not in that scene, I think that scene did an awful lot to show the legacy of the JSA. And at the end of the day, this is the legacy that Courtney Whitmore started. And it was just an incredible scene. It's so nice to think that we could pick up, if we ever revisit the story, we could re-pick up in the 10 years between the time jump, or we could pick up after this time jump and meet them all again as adult characters. Because yes, Courtney has become Star Woman, and I did also appreciate that they referenced Dragon Queen, suggesting that Cindy has finally joined the JSA.
She beat the allegations.
She did.
That's a girl.
Oh man, it was so nice. I will say I was a bit disappointed that we didn't get to see more of her in the episode, because I feel like the way they all turned on her and doubted her, we could have done with maybe a scene between her and Yolanda, like saying, I'm sorry I doubted you, and Cindy could have been like, I'm sorry for all the horrible things I did to you over the years. But the fact that Cindy showed up at the Whitmore house, it was part of their big festive dinner, I think probably did all the work it needed to. She's officially part of the team now, and that's great. And can we talk about her father becoming a plush gorilla?
Oh my God, I was screaming.
And they are not treating that stuffed animal well. Not that they should. He was awful to her, but like, just does the dog have it during the dinner? Do they have a dog? Someone has it.
Yes, yeah. The Whitmore dog was tearing it to pieces. And she was like, hope you're having fun, Daddy, which is what she always called him. So, I mean, sinister as always, but that's Cindy. And I mean, like, that's the kind of like, I mean, comeuppance is not the right word, but that's the kind of comeuppance she deserved, because everybody treated her so awfully when she was trying to make an effort. And I feel like she's finally gotten over her issues, and she can finally be a hero with the rest of them. But I mean, to go back to the flash forward scene, I mean, like, I was very happy to see Jay Garrick show up out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
shocked. I was like, what are you doing here?
Right.
He broke the table. I was so sad about that. Sorry.
He did. The poor Shade went to such effort not to let that break. But just a bit of reference, Jay Garrick was part of Stargirl's JSA. In season 1, they talked about him. They talked about the Flash. And then in season 2, we find out they actually had John Wesley Shipp play him. But that Flash died with the rest of the first JSA. So the Jay Garrick that knew Starman, that knew all of the original JSA, I don't believe is still alive. They even referenced recently.
Different one.
So the fact that he came through a portal or a wormhole when he destroyed the table very much suggests that this is Arrowverse's Jay Garrick / Earth Prime's Jay Garrick, the one you saw in the season finale of the Flash read. Well, okay, that one came from 2049, but that's not the point. But present day Jay Garrick.
You had me, then you lost me. You gave me too many numbers.
So, and the fact that he said that the fact that he said we need the JSA made it sound, which Courtney Whitmore tells me you're now a member of, Shed, makes it sound like he is not a member of the JSA, makes it sound like this is not the Jay Garrick that we once saw in Stargirl that was a member of the original JSA, which very much suggests like, hi, I've come from another world to pick up my other Earth besties. Can you come help me with a problem? So everyone's now, I think the running theory is, could we see Stargirl and the JSA finally make the first appearance on The Flash in its final season? Because that was kind of one of the loose ends tied up by Crisis, or left open by Crisis on Infinite Earths. It would be cool to see.
But don't you think we're like wishing a lot on the final season of The Flash?
Yeah, I know.
We are, but you know what? They like to stuff things into. If we do like one episode arcs and reserve like 3 to 4 episodes for them to tie up Arrowverse loose ends, we can still do it.
That's true. I just feel like I keep seeing like, oh, well, they tied this up on The Flash. Well, they tied this up on The Flash. And I'm like, I don't know, guys. They got 13 episodes. They got to do their own stuff. I mean, I want it for everybody. Yeah. I'm just like,
I swear, give me the JSA over Team Flash any day of the week. I would happily watch that. I'm sorry, not sorry. But yeah, it does feel like The Flash has Green Arrow and the Canaries, Legends of Tomorrow, Batwoman, now just Stargirl all to tie up. But I feel like Stargirl was left in such a beautifully triumphant place, as in our work is never done, but let's take this moment to celebrate this victory. And I think when the Shade he referenced the ISA, he referenced Eclipso, and then he referenced the Ultra-Humanite, which are the villains of the 3 seasons. But then he started talking about the Nebula Man and the Saving the 7 Soldiers of Victory, which I assume were the stories that the future of seasons were supposed to tell, and then didn't happen, unfortunately, because I believe Jeff Johns had storylined 6 seasons, which shocked me. I thought the show could have gone on for 4 or 5. Didn't expect 6 to be the option, which is kind of awful now because it only got halfway through its run. But I mean, for a series finale to just not only wrap up the current season storyline, wrap up the storylines that season 1 and 2 left open, and then also skip forward and show us what happened to our characters in the future. I just think I couldn't have asked for anything more from a series finale. That's how you do it. And it's pretty funny that this wasn't originally intended to be a series finale. So how does it end up on my favorite list of series finales ever? I don't know. That's kind of spectacular, but that's Stargirl in a nutshell for me. I am so proud and so happy of that finale. I watched the whole thing with a smile on my face. I know I was supposed to be live tweeting, but I did not touch my phone until the breaks. I was glued to it from start to finish. And I believe I said in a tweet afterwards that is the ultimate series finale for me, because it left me wanting more, and yet it left me feeling completely and utterly satisfied. And I don't think you could want anything else from a series finale of one of your favorite shows.
And that it feels like it would live on anyway. Like that last title, Never the End, was beautiful. Like I wasn't invested in the show, but I got a little teary when it came out.
I was like, what are they doing to me? Michael, I have to ask, do you think, like, obviously fans would want the show to not have ended with season 3, but do you think now that we know these 3 seasons are the series, at least for now, because they said it's never the end, but I mean, we're not going to hope on that for too long. But as it stands with these 3 seasons, do you think the series works as a trilogy? Like, do you think the storytelling is like complete within these 3 seasons?
Without a doubt, yes. This is my favorite movie trilogy. I just, the fact, like, we saw them, I said very much, this was very much a season story about the murder mystery, who killed the gambler, and then halfway through it pivots, and all of a sudden the icicle history comes into it, the former JSA versus ISA history comes into it. This very much was not just focused on wrapping up its own story. It wrapped up the previous 2 season stories, any of the loose ends. We saw Mike get to see his birth mother there and visit her in the diner for that beautiful scene, and then he still called Barbara mom. I thought that scene broke me. I really, really got emotional at that one. Like, just one little scene when he called Barbara mom was beautiful. We also got to see, of course, Cindy become the hero of the story as well. Mike, we find out in the future that he becomes a member of JSA. Jordan got his comeuppance as well. My goodness, what did they do to my man Starman? That poor man, all he went through. But we did find out in the flash forward from the Shed that the JSA did rescue the real Starman. They put his brain back in his body, and I assume he retired after that. And I believe me, after what he'd been through, he should have. I assume Pat retired after that as well, now that Mike's taken over a Stripe. It just, every little loose thread was wrapped up. We also learned that Jenny and her brother, Green Lantern's daughter, and her twin brother were also both members of the new JSA. the Shade was a member of the new JSA. Every story, every tease, every nod they referenced throughout those 3 seasons somehow got wrapped up either in this season or this series finale. And I just think that is an incredible end to an incredible story. I said that each season of Stargirl feels like a movie, but all of Stargirl collectively feels like a movie now. And how they pull that off, I do not know. I will absolutely go on record saying here that Stargirl had the smoothest run of all of the Arrowverse shows, and that is by far the best series finale that any of them have given so far. We will see if The Flash can match it. But Stargirl has always been in a league of its own. And now, bowing out prematurely, it continues to be in a league of its own. And that is why I'm both satisfied and yet I will miss the show terribly because it's just been so much fun.
It's a mic drop right there.
Yeah.
How do we follow that?
We don't, but The Flash can try. But to move on to the Winchesters, which is kind of bringing the moment down, considering how Stargirl was fantastic in a series finale, and the Winchesters fall finale was, it happened. It was a thing that happened on our screens. I just feel like there had been so much hype around episode 7 that I really thought we were going to be getting something that made us want to continue watching come 2023. And I will continue watching. It's just that wasn't how, it didn't run how a fall finale would, with exception to the different, I'm gonna say cameos at this point, because Tom appeared as Sam Campbell and I stress appeared. Like,
I have seen Tom Welling on our screen longer when Clark Kent was super speeding through Smallville. That this was all that 5 seconds cameo appearance felt like a little bit of a disappointment to me. I will say that I enjoyed everything that happened in the episode, but now to use an example that you both know what we've just talked about it, the Stargirl series finale had a lot to do, and yet within the first 5 minutes, we were saying how it felt like it was pulling no punches, got right into the story, and then still managed to press pause on the story for a 20-minute fight scene, and then pick the story back up and still leave you feeling completely fulfilled. I don't have a problem with any of what happened in the fall finale of the Winchesters. I feel like the structure of it knocked it way off course because we spent like the 3/4 of the episode very much stood still, and then everything had to happen all of a sudden in the last act of the episode, and it left you with no time to ask questions, to wonder, wait, why did this happen? Again, the episode and its developments were fine, but the structure of it left a lot to be desired for me.
Yeah, the pacing was unbalanced, imbalanced, either one. It was just like not a whole lot happened in the beginning. There was a lot of vague lines and people leaving rooms, and it's like, can we finish our sentences, finish our thoughts, so we're not watching you leave the room for the next scene? Like, I don't know, that when those things happen a lot in an episode, they get distracting, and I think I was distracted by things that were happening outside of the story, like just like little tiny grievances that you might have with the script, or like even the blocking. When I mentioned with you guys, this is probably neither here nor there, people probably don't care about this stuff, but you know, it's on our heart, we're going to get it out. When I keep wanting to say Drake, when John was talking to Henry and Henry just like randomly walked around and switched places, and I was like, that was the strangest blocking decision. He just for no reason turned around. And I know they kind of do that sometimes in shows to keep like the angles fresh and to like move things around. And I was like, oh, they're gonna put Millie in the arch of this. I don't even know where they are anymore. I don't know what this place was, but they did that so he can see her when she walks in. And then they didn't really do that. And that scene, I think that moment, I'm sure it probably meant a lot more for fans of Supernatural to see this character, to see these characters interact, to see what all this means. But just the way that it was executed, I was like, oh, so why did we move him if that wasn't really like a big, like, we're all our breaths being taken away moment? Like, that wasn't really how it played out on screen.
yeah, so there was a lot of you have to be here and you have to be here and you say this and you leave this room and then we have to have this moment here. Like it didn't think we're like 20 or so minutes in by the time the conversations feel like they mean something towards character development rather than just pushing the plot forward. Personally, I think I started tapping in when Mary and Carlos had that conversation about the ghouls that killed his parents, and like him getting her to see that this is not her fault, and how he has to. I love how this show does a lot with talking about how healing is complicated. So like he hasn't necessarily gotten to the point that he believes it's not his fault that his parents died. He's gotten to the point that he understands that it's not his fault, even if emotionally he can't quite get there. But like there are events in your life that are out of your control. He wanted a guitar. Like it's the ghouls who killed his parents. Him wanting a guitar and them being in where the place they need to be in to get that guitar, that's not his fault. Like, I just really enjoyed how much this show takes the time to have these conversations. I just wish in this fall finale that we had gotten to these conversations a little bit quicker than that we had gotten.
Yeah, I get that. And I feel like the Carlos and Mary conversation was one of my favorite moments of the episode as well, because we haven't had this, they've had this like such already established dynamic. We never really get to see it on screen anymore. They had that awkward tension in the pilot, and then maybe they had a scene where they got over it in episode 2 or something. Carlos was always paired with someone else. So it was kind of exciting to finally see that scene. And I do feel like that started it somewhat on a high, but then the rest of the episode kind of just stayed in the same place with different dynamics, different conversations. And it only really felt like it started getting going at the scene when John was talking to his father. And I feel like part of that was because Drake delivered such a great performance right before it happened. And that was when you finally felt the moment, if you know what I mean. It felt like, okay, now we're getting finale feels. I'm not sure it really followed through on it, but I did appreciate those little moments between when you did start to feel like the stakes were raised a little bit.
And I don't know if I'm fully locked in on the stakes, if I'm being honest. There were some conversations with like, we have to save humanity. And I was like, is it that serious yet? I was so confused. And I know I've said before on the podcast that I'm never going to 100% understand the mythology of the show. And I've accepted that. I'm here for the vibe. I'm here for the characters. I'm going to understand what I can. But when they're having those bigger conversations about the box or like whatever, and I'm like, I don't know. It's just 5 people in a room. It doesn't seem like the stakes are that intense. Maybe it's just me. I'm not criticizing the show. You guys know I love the show, but I was just like it felt like they were more stressed about the stakes as the characters than me as a viewer was just kind of like, or I thought we were just trying to find Tom Welling. I don't understand the fall of humanity. I'm not super locked in on the stakes of the season long arc, I think. Because I've really enjoyed like this more standalone stories in the beginning of the season. And then this one felt like it was trying to full circle with stuff that I was kind of patchy with.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I feel like Arrowverse examples, CW shows, the first couple of seasons always feel like so much great stakes. The Flash season 1, for example, end of the world. What are we going to do about it? And then when they get like 5 or 6 seasons in, suddenly they're starting to tell us about how it's the end of the world. And you're like, well, I can't see that around you. Unfortunately, I don't feel like the Winchesters should be at that stage in its first season yet, because at least the Flash had those previous seasons to hark back to when you felt the stakes. I agree with you. It does feel like suddenly it's gotten very life or death with no evidence to suggest that it is. Maybe if we had got to spend more time with the Aglaeca themselves, we could have seen that. But they had Bridget Regan show up, deliver some beautiful one-liners, but like she's been very far and few between throughout the season. I feel like they haven't been making the most of her. And that takes us right into this episode when I feel that, again, they did not make the most of her.
No, she just collapsed. And I was like, is that it?
It was so, like, you would have thought, because she's a radio DJ, right, that we would have been having a storyline about mind control, about like turning, like, at least Lawrence, Kansas, I think that's where they are, against the hunters in a way, or like manipulating events to change the course of how things are being run in the town. But instead it was kind of like, yeah, she's Roxy the DJ, but she's not really DJing that much. Like we saw her playing the songs and whatnot, but unfortunately with Bridget's character, it felt very much like we were going for like aesthetic. It was very like she is a 70s villain, and that's as far as we got with her, which she is fantastic as a villain. And so the fact that she was wasted in the Winchesters, unless she's coming back, maybe perhaps like she will end up being the queen, not Roxy, but somehow she'll just look exactly like the queen. Queen is
that's what I thought too. I was like, this can't be the end of this actress who was like a big, like, she's a fixture on this network. Like we've seen her play a villain in so many shows. Like this can't be the end. I was like, is she going to come back in another form? I don't know. I don't want to believe that it's the end for Bridget Regan because she was so good, and I don't
I
think we got
know.
nearly enough of that character.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I have to say that she's a phenomenal villain. I know we've said it before, but she's also phenomenal at making all of her villains different so that they don't feel like the same character. Because you could say that on paper that's being typecast as a villain, but no, all these villains are completely different characters. She was the main villain of, I think, of all of season one of seasons of Agent Carter, and she was an utter joy and an utter delight. But yet you still wanted Agent Carter to defeat her. On Batwoman, she was only in 3 episodes as Poison Ivy, and yet she was the lead of those 3 episodes. You cared about Poison Ivy. You really wanted her to succeed. So, but because she only had a limited role of 3 episodes, you were like, oh, I want more of her. Where does it go from here? So when I found out she was more of a recurring character on this and she could be more spread out throughout the season, I was like, okay, finally we get to see more of her. And we got to see less of her than we did on Batwoman. And I feel like that was um, a failure to capitalize on her talents.
Mhm.
Again, maybe I'm judging wrong, but that last scene of the finale felt very much like a scene out of Alien, where they're looking at something and the queen is actually going to be a giant one of those spider creatures or
Oh,
whatever.
I hope not.
You know what I
She
mean?
might
Um,
be.
and that didn't give me the feeling that it should, because I wanted a shadow or something. It literally looked like they were standing looking at nothing, and I was
I
like,
know. I was like, cut, turn the camera around. I want to know. And they didn't.
show me. So I don't know if it's like, I will say one thing that I thought that was quite good was they very much set this up like Stranger Things, the mind flayer, the hive mind, that they all exist together and that they all have this collective
Oh,
consciousness.
that's a good catch.
Yeah,
Didn't
Yeah.
think of that.
I think that's beautiful, but look at how Stranger Things did it, and then look at how this did. I think the episodic format is letting us down because we have to get through this story, we have to get through that story, and then they just like weave these little parts in between, and you never fully get the gravity or the stakes that that a show like Stranger Things would have been
Yeah.
able to employ with that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because the people in the, I'm just gonna call it a cave because I'm not even really sure where they are. That took me out, watching them dig and dig
Mhm.
and dig. And I know the Accretor were taking over bodies, but I didn't know it was to the extent that we were putting together a labor force to like dig things up for this queen because the Accretor are trying to find a new world to live on. Like, I feel like the stakes are supposed to be high. The stakes don't feel high. Like
Mhm.
the stakes felt high with Sam, right? Because Mary found the bloody bag, and because he was being held captive, even though that didn't really take too long for them to get him out of that situation. But in any case, like, and when he appeared and he saves John and Mary, that felt very big and emotional, and it was great to see Mary back with her father. But it just felt, I was like, we need to dig into more emotional stakes besides John and Mary and the parents.
Mhm.
What did we think about the kiss?
Rush.
Rushed, yes.
Um, yeah, on paper, I think that is a genius thing to force them together. But in this episode, I feel the execution let it down. I did, again, all down to the performances. Drake, definitely the way he looked at her, like softly. It was like, is this a normal night for you? And then Mary smiled. It was like most days or whatever. I think that scene absolutely was fine, but the build up and the getting there and the leading to it, I feel so bad for this episode airing right or at the same week as Stargirl, because I'm going to keep referring to it. We said Stargirl did so much without doing too much. I actually don't think this episode of the Winchesters had that much to do, and yet it took too much on. I think we had Tom Welling, we had the Accreta's big showdown, we had the reveal of the Accreta Queen, we had, and then the first kiss, and I just feel
And
like
Henry, too.
yeah, very true. Yeah, because they pressed pause on the first half of the episode, the second half had to work overtime, and I feel like every single one of those select moments were fine, but none of them carried the stakes they should have because we spent too long stuck in the same place in the first half of the episode.
I almost wish they hadn't kissed, and I thought they weren't going to. I thought it was gonna because they haven't had any like near misses, right? Where they were like about to kiss and then they
Mhm.
got interrupted. Like they haven't had any of those like classic will they won't they almost kisses. And I thought we were gonna get that. And I would have been fine with it. I would have been so thrilled to be teased with them about to kiss and then they get interrupted by something. But instead, it just was like they were having a weird conversation, and then all of a sudden, it was just kiss, and I was like, I'm, I love these characters so much, and I don't feel anything in this moment.
Well,
I'm glad it happened, but I didn't want it to happen in this episode.
well,
I
it
don't know.
felt kind of like a last minute decision. like it was going to be an almost kiss, and then they're like, no, just have them kiss. That way we can like progress forward into the rest of the episodes where they'll be navigating what this means for them. But it just felt, and this might be because there was an extended fight scene, which was amazing, by the way. Like Drake and Meg truly did that.
Yeah.
Like they were excited about that fight sequence, and they should have been, because it was fantastic, phenomenal. But because there was extended fight scene, then you had Richard Eacon's character Roxy like having her last like moment, and then those two go running. You're like, you got 2 seconds to get Mary and John in an emotional place to kiss, and then Sam comes in through the door. I'm like, can we breathe? like there's just, it is a structure issue. It is because they spent too much time pushing pause on the first half of the episode, that by the time you get to the end, everything has to just be like boom, 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 boom. Except the ending scene got to breathe. I don't really know why that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like they were leaving that as the big cliffhanger. And I was like, guys, we just wanted to see Tom Welling at this point, that you gave him 5 seconds off, and that would have been a decent cliffhanger. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like this show takes so many cues from Buffy and the early seasons of Smallville, and back in that generation and that era, 40 minutes was not too short for an episode. I find a lot of modern CW shows feel like, or modern network TV shows feel like 40 minutes is too short for an episode. And I just think that's a structure issue, because so much happened in that second half, but yet there wasn't enough room for any of it to breathe. So it left you wanting a little bit more, and not in the right kind of way. It made you wish they had a little bit more time to breathe with some of these important developments. And I feel like that's kind of what I felt with the finale, which is pretty funny because the first half of the episode was so slow moving. I just feel like it wasn't balanced right. And like Reed said, the pacing was off. Like we said, the structure's wasn't right. I feel like all the stars could have aligned, but they just didn't for me on this episode.
I think once again, Michael hit us with the mic drop. I want everyone to go rewind and listen to what he just said about the timing of broadcast television. Like that was like the most profound thing and the most precise criticism of modern television that I don't think anybody's written that yet, and I think it's perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, so then we should jump to Horseshoe Bay, because we're not going to beat that mic drop. Michael, I think this is an episode of mic drops for you.
And he deserves it. It's
yes, exactly.
I have to think of a good Nancy Drew line now to close us out.
No pressure.
Yes. We did do another double feature. So you are getting episode 4 and episode 5. And to kick things off with episode 4, let's talk about the fansin.
Oh,
okay. Now they are blending in together, 205 and 204. But what happened in 204 with them?
So this is a whole thing where everyone is having a crisis because they think they're going to die. So George makes her sister be a waitress at the restaurant. And so Nick pulls George back from the ledge and is just like, I need you to know that I love you, because you need to know that someone loves you. And it felt as if, okay, we're here, especially in the context of, I don't know if y'all caught the line with her sister Jessie, but it's only been a month since the blood bucket. So where he has,
oh wow,
so he's with Nancy. They broke up. He was sad about Nancy. Got with George. They revealed their relationship, and now we're at I love you. It could only have been 2.5 weeks at the most.
Wow, that's wild when you put it like that. But I will say again, the Winchesters picked a very bad week for its finale. It didn't feel like it had some stakes that it should have. And I will say credit to the Nancy Drew writing team, because even with the fact that we are feeling a little front loaded and a little rushed here, you felt the stakes. You understand why someone feels the need to say I love you, like right before a life or death situation. And between these 2 episodes, the life or death situation was high.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely was. They had us feeling that in both of the episodes. You're right. It does blend together in terms of like, I feel like you can't talk about 4 without talking about 5. But the context for why Nick tells George that he loves her, I thought was beautiful, because she is someone who did not hear it before. So to have someone say it to her, and yes, in the context of we are gonna die, but also, you know, that like you need to hear it. Not to mention, we don't do the typical, she doesn't say it back and then he gets in his feelings, and then we have to spend the rest of the episode where she comes to terms with being able to say, I love you. He just like, you know what? I love you more for not being able to say it back. It's on brand for you. We'll just wait.
I am kind of like, reserved on Nick and George because I don't think it needs to be the exact polar opposite of his relationship with Nancy for us to like understand the relationship. But I think it would be a little bit more helpful, like that scene where um Nancy finds the ghost vision goggles and Nick was like the engineer of them, and she's like, "When did you get so into this?" And he ends up saying like, "You never asked." And I'm thinking like, do we see George asking those questions about him? I'm not sure that it's like is George providing the like the attention that Nancy did not give to him to make this relationship different? I think that was a question I had in 204 with that
Mhm.
moment in particular. But I was also like, why are we still shaming Nancy about the place she was in her relationship with Nick? Like, why is she still catching strays? As much as she might deserve them, I was like, I don't think we need to continue to unpack Nick and Nancy's
Mhm.
relationship with slights, comparing it to maybe even George's relationship with him. I don't know. That scene was really loaded to me when that line was so cutting. I loved it. Don't
Right.
get me wrong. It was such a cutting line for Nancy to confront, like, oh yeah, you're right. I didn't ask you any personal questions about you because I was too consumed with my own stuff. Um, but just largely looking at the relationships big picture, I was like, what are we getting at here with continuing to make Nancy face this? Like, is it any different in his new relationship? That was the big question I
Mhm.
had in 204.
And it does feel that she's grown a lot. She still has her issues, and that's fine. She's been through a lot. She's dealing with them. But yeah, maybe it's just because Nick's such a nice character. I was like, oh, that was mean all of a sudden. um, uh, and I know
I mean, he was honest too.
yeah, absolutely. And I know the truth can hurt and everything, but it did feel like that. Not that they'd gotten past it, but they were moving through it. And then that suddenly felt like a throwback. And we'll get to the argument they all have in the 5th episode right before it all goes down. I know tensions are running high and everything, but it felt like, why would you say that? I don't know. I know what you mean. It's hard to make with the comparison with George because we don't get to see as much time of them on screen. The show devoted an awful lot of time to Nick and Nancy at the start, and it is yet to do that with Nick and George. It's getting there, but it's yet to do it. Yeah, it just that kind of wow took me out. And I know tensions are running high, but Nancy's just doing what she can to save y'all's lives. Give her a
Yeah.
break.
Well, also because I think the when George does ask a question on screen, and it does happen in the previous season, she asks after he says something that would make you ask a question. So she did it. Nancy has it's the same context. You did a thing that she wasn't aware that you were able to do, and therefore she asked about it. Even as a Drewson shipper, I do have to say, and this it does have to do with episode 5 as well. Nancy and Nick need to unpack their relationship away from everybody else. Because at this point, because I'm like, well, more so with Nick, because Nick clearly has some baggage that he and Nancy need to talk through personally, where nobody else can see, hopefully off screen, because stop it. Like, I love them, but as like, you decided to move on, I don't think you get to like she should not keep catching strays over things that you have yet to bring to her attention about your feelings about them. I love him, but like, sir, you're with George now. We need to like, and they always have like George be very understanding. I was like, you need to ask him some questions about how he feels about Nancy, because we're a little still too raw.
Yeah, we're tiptoeing around that, George. I think maybe we need to heal. We all need to heal.
Yes.
Pull up the
Yeah.
red table for these three.
Yes. So this whole like this 2-episode arc though was about healing as well. They gave us a very emotional story for Odette, which they started seeding in the in episode 4. That whole sequence with Agnes in the basement to try to figure out what's going on down there, the fact that she's trapped in the base, still living through the trauma of being locked away and then being told that she's going mad when everyone knows that she's not, when she knows that she's not, so therefore she does end up going mad. My heart broke for Agnes. Agnes wasn't doing anything but enjoying some jewels she didn't realize that she got through murder.
My goodness, the way that story came about. And I feel like this show has done such a good job with its compelling storylines, but it leans very easily into the whole horror sequencing as well. And that their scene of Nancy and Bess down in the cellar where they couldn't get out, horror movie 101. It
Oh
was
my God.
terrifying at times. And sometimes when a show does the emotional story, which is done with Lucy, it can also play very well with the more fun, one-dimensional side of villains, and it's done that in the past as well with some of the demons or whatever they fought. I honestly thought the Aglaeca was going to be that, so the fact that they've managed to come up with such a like deep and powerful backstory that makes you feel so much for her in such a short space of time. Again, credit to the writing team, because even though you're like, oh, go away every time the Aglaeca showed up, you're always like, oh, when you find out why she became that, if you know what I mean.
I know I took some shots at the Aglaeca last week, which I do kind of still stand by, which like Aglaeca, just mind your business, girl. But I do like how heavy and deep the storyline is. It kind of makes sense because this show does such a careful job at unpacking the generational trauma in this town that is so connected. And I think there's a larger metaphor if I were to really get like intelligent about it and like write a college thesis paper, be like something about like how this show has a metaphor about like trauma and all of the ghosts and demons in this town. There's something really, really, really rich below the surface in the subtext in the show. And I think after the Lucy stuff and now with the Agnes, Odette, Aglaeca, it's like, wow, they're really telling such a powerful story that is still fun to watch and not completely devoid of any levity or joy. They're trying to say something, they're trying to tap into things that do have very real roots in our countries around the world. That's probably giving the story way too much credit. It's not that deep, but the stories are deep and they go really deep. And there's just this trauma that's coursing in every corners of this town, and it affects all of these characters at this little seafood diner. It's like it's when you like really piece it together and look at it all, it's like, wow, it all impacts all of them in such shocking and striking ways.
It does. It seems like Nancy Drew is very much about the power of stories, your personal story, and how that can be changed by other people and outside influences. And yes, sometimes by people's perceptions of you. But in this case, when it comes to a lot of these ghosts, it has to do with the way that they are dehumanized in their death. And like people steal from them. I love the moment where Nancy like disrupted I guess he's not a historian, but the tour guide who has one vision of how history went and thinks that any other facts are irrelevant. And she's like, they're not. She was not. First, she wasn't that man's wife. Second, she did all these other things that have nothing to do with him. He's like, oh, cute factoid. And I was like, it's not a factoid. It's the truth. And you should know more about Odette. Or like,
I kind of love that character, and I hope he comes back for him and Nancy to lock horns again in like season 3 for just like another episode, because their dynamic was so fun.
Yes.
He was exasperated with her. He's like, but perhaps you will actually go read some more materials.
And then he thought she was disrupting his tour, but then all the people were like, oh, look, it's the true crime girl. Love that.
Oh, but I will say something about like, where you can see the plot. So like the fact that the book isn't behind a case, the hymnal, like it's a very old
just put
hymnal.
it down and left the room. And it's like, Nancy's smarter than you, guy.
It's just sitting there, so no one's ever stolen that hymnal ever. It's not behind a lockbox. Like
he deserved it at that point.
He did. But he'll have to come back at some point. We're always working with the Historical Society as it is. So she will be back for this man's information that she will question and also provide him more facts with. But I do think that, like, to go back to like generational trauma or and truths that are uncovered, it was really nice how they've done a very slow means of having Nancy heal, but also letting her dads be a part of this adventure, but not with her, with Ace. Like, so the road trip between Ace and her 2 dads, fantastic.
Per Ace. He thought that was such a good idea at the start, and then being stuck in that awkward silence. I love the fact he said, let's play a game, and what if about the farmer and his chicken. And like they really ran with the metaphor, and I think Yes, didn't think it worked, but I think some of that got through to the two of Carson and Ryan.
Mhm.
But yeah, S is a genius. We love S.
I can't remember now if the conversation between Ryan and Carson happened in 4 or 5, but that they do have this one conversation. I think it was in 205 now. I don't know. We'll find out when I say it. When they finally kind of like realize, like, oh, we have a common goal, and that common goal is to care about Nancy. So like anything that happened in the past probably should not be continued to be dredged up and hurt this girl anymore. Like we can have our differences and keep that, like, but just like put the weapons down. White flag. We both care about this girl, and that's all that should matter. And I thought that was a really powerful and nuanced scene. It didn't hit us over the head. I at least I didn't feel like it was like whacking me over the head with like a quick, like, we need to get these guys to be friends. I don't think they are friends, but I thought that was something very necessary and crucial to Nancy, as you said, come into her own healing about this. Like even that scene she has with Carson, where she's like, I don't like you right now, but I need you and I do love you. And eventually I'll catch up with the feeling that I'm feeling now, but I just need to exist in that moment where everything was okay.
Mhm. So the scene that you're talking about with Ryan and Carson, that is 204.
Mm-hmm.
It comes after they have that argument about where Ryan calls himself her real father, and Carson says to be a father, you have to actually be a father. So then Ryan thinks about that. Carson apologizes actually because he took something from Ryan. And so that I think is the catalyst for why Ryan will speak to Nancy, and they have that lovely moment where he lets her be abrasive because that's kind of just a part of her personality, but he helps her solve the puzzle. And she admits that, yeah, I am actually mildly interested, which we know she's more than mildly interested in learning about Ryan. And they have that lovely moment together. This show is just so good, letting Nancy feel how she feels, and then slowly working the story toward her being able to be in a place where she can open her heart, at least crack the door for both of her dads. It was really great. And Ryan was helpful. He apparently reads music and she didn't need him after that. Like once he said it was musical notes, she dismissed him. But it was just nice.
She was like, yeah, we're all done here for now.
I know. Bless him. He was so happy that he was able to offer up some kind of assistance, because I feel like sometimes he's always a bit overwhelmed by how smart these kids are, and he feels a little bit like they're just coming to him because he's got influence or that he has money or whatever, but he never gets involved in the nitty gritty of it. And so it was nice to see that, but also it was also impressive how like quickly he pivoted from yes I helped to ringing Carson and saying, okay, something's definitely going on here, we need to solve this problem. And they use humor very well, because the whole Ace situation in the car suddenly turned into Ace not being able to answer his phone on time, so they put Nancy on speaker, and then they're like, what? And that's when they figured out there was something clearly wrong there. So yeah, it was, and I think that's what ultimately forced them to work together. It's such a unique dynamic, because we did say how Ryan suddenly turned into this like great like soap villain, or like, I'm going to use this all against you if I want to, but at the same time he also wants to be a realistic father. And so where do you meet in the middle with that? And I feel like this episode kind of did that well, because they had the little like stupid argument at the start, and then they realized, hold on, we can actually help this girl here, and then that bleeds very nicely into the next episode when they're literally following her.
Yeah, so we should just jump to 205, because that car sequence where it gives you insight into Ryan's character too, and how his sense of how to be a parent is completely warped thanks to his own parents. Because he casually was like, yeah, my dad hired a PI to follow me around. He's like, that's not normal. Oh, well, I'm like, my dad like that had initiative to trick, like to pay the PI. And he's like, I'm gonna get you some parenting books. Like we're gonna fix this. But they aren't friends, but it is nice to see that they are very much like, look, we are the parents in her life. We have to figure this out. We're going to protect Nancy. So we're going to tolerate each other. But in tolerating each other, you can kind of see that they're seeing more sides to one another than they had previously. I think that Carson is really seeing how much Ryan probably would have been in Nancy's life had he been given the opportunity.
It was very much an uneasy alliance at the start, and it's still kind of like that, but it feels like it's becoming a little bit easier of an alliance the longer it goes on, if that makes sense. It feels like they're finding common ground and working through it. And I think that's been a running theme with this show in general. So it's going to be really intriguing to see how they balance this kind of new normal. I'm sure they'll end up butting heads at some point again in the future, probably many, many times. But it's just they're becoming very useful in their own ways to Nancy without even realizing it. And I think as she starts to like care about Carson again, realize that, understand why he did what he did, and then grow to care about Ryan, it's going to be really interesting to see how that dynamic develops.
Nancy continued to get confronted with difficult truths when the whole gang, I feel like we had been growing to this point. Like it didn't feel like it did kind of feel like it came out of nowhere. But when I thought about it, I was like, no, they've been feeling this quietly, secretly, probably for the duration of the series. Like you have to stop and realize like, oh, we're in this mess because of this person. Like she's the catalyst for the Aglaeca. She got us mixed into this. As much as we made our own choices to be involved, like we're still like, we have a death clock running because of a decision she ultimately made. And I think there's a fairness to it and there's an unfairness to it. And Nancy does what she does best. And she's like, no matter how you feel, I'm still going to save your lives as best as I can. And it was kind of hard to watch them all fall apart like that.
Yeah, I thought it was unfair because they did make their own decisions, at least in terms of like the Aglaeca. Like if there had been a situation in which Nancy was told not to do something and she did it anyway, I could understand. But as I know this is gotta, like you said, Reed, have been brewing. And obviously with the death clock like ticking down to 0, there isn't time for reflection on that. There's only time to point the finger and assign blame to the person that y'all are always looking to for answers in the first place, because she's like, even so they did all that, and then I think then she was like, I think it was Bess, late when something didn't work out, she's like, now what, Nancy? I was like, okay, but you were yelling at her at the top of the episode.
Yeah, to see Bess get involved, I'm like, you're usually the peacekeeper, the one that's like, we all need to stay together. I'm like, Bess, come back.
It's been interesting to watch all of their dynamics develop, but Nancy's kind of gone from this like lone warrior to kind of like the reluctant leader of the group. And now as the series has gone on, it's less reluctant. She gets things done regardless, and she does look after them, even if she doesn't always like wear her heart on her sleeve in the way that maybe Bess would. But so it was still kind of hard to see them all suddenly turn on her, because she waded her way into that conversation to try and be the peacekeeper that she somehow turned into, and then they all kind of turned on her. And I don't think there was no side of that like quadrant of them that didn't like throw an insult at one another. And it really worked because the tensions were running high, as like that the cracks were starting to show. Fear was making them do horrible things. But I think they never really like fully apologized for it. But I think the reason it worked so well is because it nicely led into how even in their final moments, they were the 4 people they wanted to call up and talk to when they thought they were going to die. They didn't need to apologize for it because they knew that within this last however many weeks or months, they had become each other's people, and they were the family they wanted to spend those last few moments with.
Bess said they're family.
Yes.
She said what I wanted them to say, but then George denied her hug, and I was like, George, come on, do it for
me. Just one hug. But no, that whole sequence was very lovely, and of course it started because Bess made the phone call. I like the conference call that they're all on, which still has like a tension in it, but there's such a beautiful vulnerability with Nancy as you can hear the tears as she's like talking to them, and I'm like, I know you're not gonna apologize, but I want everyone to apologize to Nancy, because even if there was some truth in there, like she didn't deserve all of that. But I guess it was necessary, even though out of everybody, Nick and Nancy do need to like have a conversation off to the side about some things, because I don't think their relationship was all about her mom's grief, but I mean, her grief over her mom, but okay.
Ace saying that, I was like, Ace, that was kind of okay.
Well, it was insightful. Like it wasn't even, he didn't even say that with like malice behind it. He was like, this is what happened.
He laid it out plainly, and I was like, okay, Ace, see you.
He's like, let's just get to the root of the problem. But it just was, their connection is lovely, and I am glad that they said that their family. And I was gonna say there was a hug. It wasn't one George wanted, but Nancy gave it. I think the whole sequence at the end, not to skip past Nick like tricking the Aglaeca, but the whole sequence at the end, where they find out it's love that they need to use in order to defeat the Aglaeca, and they read her letters to the. Did they name the English woman?
I don't
Oh,
think so. Did they?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. Well, the love Odette had for the English woman with no name, that she that was their means of being able to bring her back to the person. I love that they separated Odette from the monster that the Aglaeca is, that it was betrayal and suffering and how she died that turned her into a monster, but she herself is not. And then they are all just yelling yelling quotes from her love letters at her, even in French for Nick. And that is how we get to Odette, though I'm so sorry to George in her stomach, because getting impaled by the harpoon was just
that scene was shocking, but the acting, the whole cast, when Nick was like, "Stay back, stay back," I was like, "Oh, we're acting, acting with a capital ting." Like I was like. It's usually we're going off about Kennedy, but it was like really the whole cast. Like Madison, that's his real name in real life. She's usually the one with the quick quips on the side, but she was every cut to her just losing it. I was like, oh, we can always see how we feel through Bess, because she's like she's our eyes and ears of any character. She and Ace are like our eyes and ears, and just see them fall apart.
I know.
Oh my God, it was an intense sequence. That one
and
hurt.
The length to which Nancy went to go save George. Granted, that is what's going to set off the next part of the plot, because in her desire not to lose her friend, she didn't care about anything about those lock boxes and just turned off the electricity and stole that shroud. But she brought her back. I think I love that the amount of love in the room was transcendent. Like they're all love George. And so they're all having an emotional reaction to her. Ace trying to help Nick, and Nick not being able to be allowed help because he's just emotionally gone. That Nancy running into the room, still crying, throwing the shout over her and crying on George when she thought it didn't work. And then hugging her. Like once George wakes up, she's like, ugh. Okay, no. I was like, girl, you were dead.
Or just like, what did I miss? But you just felt utterly exhausted watching that scene, just because of how utterly exhausted by grief they were. Just, oh my goodness.
That day on set must have been
crazy.
Oh, man.
It's just like, it felt endless. And we've seen episodes after this. We knew George shouldn't die, but like in that like a moment, you genuinely believed she had. And it's just like everything we talked about, Stargirl wrapping everything up, everything, the blood bucket, it all came to pass in this one episode. You were just like, they didn't overcome it. Nancy found a way around it, but they didn't overcome it in the end. And I also think that was such an important like character moment for Nancy, because the mission has always been her priority. And even though the mission was technically over at this point, logic or nothing played into this, she was going to save George. She had started seeing the people throughout her whole journey here. And now she didn't care about anything else other than saving her friend. And that was so, so powerful. And I just thought that was such a great moment for her, and just great development for the show in general.
And it does kind of tie into what their fight was about, because their fight was like, the risks, but you still called to the Aglaeca and you put us in this position. And then again, like, she knows the risks, because the woman at the historical society told her, like, we don't know what kind of like darkness these things can unleash. Like, we're not just gonna open them up and tinker around with them. Like, we're like this, they're back there for a reason. So Nancy kind of knows the risks of putting the shroud on George and bringing her back to life, but she is willing to take that risk again, because I think she could have done two things. She could have just been like, if we let George die, this could all potentially be over officially. And I think that when she doesn't make that choice, she's hopeful that the risks will not outweigh the reward of bringing George back and not ending their story like that. So Yeah, I'm curious to see how they react to the aftershocks of this decision that Nancy made without, again, consulting them.
Yeah, well, especially because it seemed like in her panic, and then the relief of George being back, she forgot about what was said about not knowing what the consequences would be of that action. It seems like one of the consequences is that Odette is still around, and perhaps George is possessed by her. She couldn't speak a lick of French.
And she's singing it, and then Odette's in the mirror, but she's in the mirror after George walks away. So I was curious about that. Like, is she in the mirror?
Well, with that, wasn't it Mac? That character was trapped in the mirror at one point in the show. So I feel like there's definitely little teases and references to what we saw previously in the season. But what I was going to say was, I keep going on about how this season got ended prematurely, or the first season got ended prematurely. And you're like, where was the original end point of that season going to be? Was the Aglaeca going to turn into the big bad after they solved the Lucy's murder? Because it was very much just like unintentionally genius timing that the season ended just as it solved Lucy's murder, but that was not the initial plan. The season was supposed to go on for longer. So would this have been the original finale? Because all I got throughout that entire episode was finale feelings. Not only did they like meet the George blood bucket destiny, they tied up the Aglaeca issue. The Aglaeca is no longer the primary threat. And then we leave the episode with that little teaser. Love the teaser by the end of Nancy turning around to the camera. I was like, did you hear that?
Nancy, who are you talking to, girl?
She broke the fourth wall. It was great.
Did she look at us? I couldn't tell.
She's looking at us. Like,
Wow.
it's her eyes are a little off though, so I was wondering as well, but I think she's looking at us.
That would have been a great season 1 finale. You know what I mean? So I feel like that could have worked as a season 1 finale, because whatever goes on from here, the worst case scenario is going to be aftermath of what happened before. I do feel like the Lucy and Aglaeca storylines for the most part have been wrapped up. So I feel like this was where season 2 was supposed to start. And that leaves me like, if we've technically a clean slate now, we don't know which one of these demons or monsters could be the main story, or is this where the villain of the week thing will come in? Will we see more of them throughout the season?
That does make sense, Michael, because this season has 18 episodes and this is 5. If you subtract 5 from 18, you get 13. Right? I did the math right?
Yes. So this could have been the next.
Season 1 was 18. If you add 5, that's 23. I don't know. The maths at some point.
Well, they would have. So they probably 204 and 205 would have happened. That would have been one episode. And so some of the scenes would have been condensed down or probably entirely removed. So that would have been fine. They would have still ended up with 22. But I do think, I think the math is mathing, that is where we would enter to season 2. Before we leave for Shubei, though, to go to our toast, I do want to mention that Ace made a call to the person in witness protection, and he thinks that he's their brother. So that's going to be an interesting story plot.
Yeah.
Very much so. We don't know much about Ace. We don't really know that much about his family. But again, that feels like another one of those great season 1 cliffhangers that would be carried on in season 2. So I feel like we're going to learn more about Ace, and I think all 3 of us are totally on board with that.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm on Hardy Boy watch now, just to see whether or not he ends up being a Hardy Boy. We'll see by the end of the series. But before we wrap up the pod, we do have to give a toast to Stargirl and her reign on the CW.
Our Cosmic Queen started on DC Universe when that service went under. She made her way over to the CW just as a CW original series, and I know everyone was worried about the fact that would a DC Universe streaming quality television show be able to sustain itself on network TV? Well, it did. Season 2 and season 3 were every bit of cinematic as season 1. The budget was there, the story was there. This is and never will be an inherently CW show, and I think that's why it shines brighter than most of the stuff on the network. It has been a joy to watch for the last 3 seasons. Yes, I'm including the DC Universe one there, and I don't know how I will cope without it, because it's been such a joy I've needed it in my life at times. It started right around the time when the world was a scary place. We had this 13 episodes of traditionally comic book show just to get lost in, and it's just gone from strength to strength throughout. I will miss it a great deal, but I am so satisfied by not just season 3, but the final episode. What an adventure it's been to Stargirl.
The Stargirl, my monk.
Cheers.
Cheers, Stargirl.
Keep Stargirl's memory alive. Watch it, make it a cult classic, and bring it back in 20 years.
Oh, yes.
When the JSS fully grown.
Yes. All right, well, that is it for this pod episode, this special pod episode dedicated to Stargirl and the Stargirl fandom. Follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our YouTube, hit that notification bell so you can get notifications of when our videos drop. We are the CW Spiral. I'm Sabrina.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Reed.
Bye, y'all.